The scent of sun-baked asphalt mixed with freshly cut grass hit me the moment I opened the car door. Home. The word echoed inside me, simple yet strange, like a familiar tune suddenly playing in a train station. After months away, the quiet normalcy of the suburban street felt surreal, a jarring contrast to the disciplined chaos I'd just left behind. My father, Mike Vance, a retired Marine Corps Sergeant Major, stood on the porch, arms crossed. He gave a slight nod, so subtle it was almost invisible, but I understood. That nod meant, "Welcome back, son. Well done." Years of service had pressed his emotions into faint creases at the corners of his eyes and mouth. My gaze shifted toward the wall by the front door. Beside the American flag snapping in the afternoon breeze hung a polished wood and glass case. Inside, Marine Corps dress blues. The brass buttons gleamed, the blood-red stripe cut down the trousers, the medals sat perfectly aligned on the left breast pocket, among them the one I'd received after Kandahar. Dad had insisted on displaying it. "People should see what it stands for, Ethan," he had said, his voice rough but firm. Watching sunlight catch the case, I felt both pride and the heavy weight of an oath that never really lifted. It wasn't just clothing. It was vows sworn, brothers lost, lines held. A fragment of my soul laid bare for the world to see. That sense of peace at home lasted less than a day. That afternoon I found Dad on the porch, frowning at a thick cream envelope. He grunted, somewhere between disbelief and disgust, and handed it to me. Cold typewritten words, violation notice. The display case and flag were deemed an eyesore, not in conformity with community aesthetic standards. Signed, Ella Croft, HOA President. Heat prickled under my collar. My uniform, a symbol honored across the world, reduced to neighborhood clutter. Dad just shook his head, chuckling humorlessly. "She thinks she's running a kingdom, not a cul-de-sac." He crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash. "Don't let it bother you, Ethan. Bureaucrats need something to feel important about." I nodded, trusting him. Yet unease knotted in my gut. There was something personal in that sterile wording. That night, I pictured the house across the street. Behind those flawless curtains, Ella Croft watching, perhaps smirking as Dad threw away her letter. Maybe she whispered to Marcus Thorne, her ever-present enforcer, standing silent at her side. They think they deserve special treatment, unlike people who learn discipline the hard way. Thorne shifted uneasily but said nothing. 2 days later, another cream envelope arrived. This time it wasn't a suggestion. It was an ultimatum with threats of heavy fines if the non-compliant display wasn't removed within 48 hours. Dad's dry chuckle was gone. His jaw set, his granite resolve returning. He placed the notice deliberately on the table, knuckles white around the edges. "They can send all the paper they want," he said, voice low and calm, the dangerous calm I knew too well. "It's not coming down." I felt pride in his stance, but unease lingered. Ella didn't strike me as someone who backed down easily. Still, we were Vances. We didn't bow to petty tyrants. The third night, I woke to a smell crawling through my dreams. Not wood smoke. Harsher. Fabric. I bolted upright. Downstairs, the front door stood open, framing Dad's silhouette in the gray pre-dawn. He didn't move. Just stared. The display case lay shattered across the porch tiles, shards glittering like broken teeth. On the grass smoldered a black heap. The acrid stench burned my nostrils, choked my lungs. Ashes, scraps of deep blue wool, twisted brass buttons. Beside it, the American flag trampled into the damp earth. "Dad," my voice cracked. "Who? Who did this?" He didn't turn. His voice, when it came, was stripped bare, a rasp of cold fury. "They burned it, Ethan." 4 words. Flat. Final. My legs felt like lead as I stumbled onto the porch. That uniform, the one I'd worn standing rigid as Colonel Davies pinned the silver star to my chest, the one I'd worn at Corporal Evans' funeral, his mother's tears soaking my sleeve, the one my mother had touched with trembling pride the last time I saw her. It wasn't just fabric. It was sacrifice, memory, honor, and now, ashes. I whispered, "How do you know who?" "Security camera," Dad clipped, finally turning toward the house. In his office, smoke still clinging to us, he clicked the mouse. Grainy footage flickered on screen. 2 figures emerged from darkness just after 3 a.m. No masks. No attempt to hide. Ella Lenina Croft. Marcus Thorne at her shoulder. Thorne swung a crowbar, shattering the case. Together they dragged the uniform onto the lawn. Ella Lenina pulled out lighter fluid, doused the fabric, struck a match. Flames roared. Before leaving, she deliberately stepped on the fallen flag. I stared at the screen, fists clenched until my knuckles ached. This wasn't vandalism. It was calculated desecration. "It was them," I said coldly. Dad nodded. The HOA president and her lapdog. Morning brought another envelope. Another fine. This time for ashes on the lawn and failure to maintain appearance. They fined us for the remains of the uniform they had burned. My voice trembled with fury. They fined us. For this. Dad met my gaze, eyes like steel. They're trying to break us. Make us the problem. But they picked the wrong family. The wrong core. We cleaned up the glass, gathered the ashes like comrades' remains. The flag, trampled and dirty, we left where it was. Let the neighborhood see. Let her see. That afternoon, Colonel Cole connected us with veteran attorneys willing to work pro bono. We met them in a cramped borrowed office stacked with files. The lead was Sarah Jenkins, a former JAG officer, soft-voiced but razor-sharp. "Destruction of property is obvious," she said, tapping notes. "So is intentional infliction of emotional distress. But here's the big one," she thumped a legal volume. "Federal and state protections for service members. Burning your uniform, then fining you for the ashes? That's not just malicious. It's illegal." Hearing cold legal terms wrap around Ella Lenina's actions felt like vindication. This wasn't HOA business anymore. This was law. "We're not just seeking damages," Jenkins said, locking eyes with me. "We're making an example. It stops here." Media, fueled by the lawsuits and the silent wall, dug deeper into Stone Ridge HOA. Finances. History. Past disputes. What surfaced was uglier than expected: selective, exorbitant fines, pressured sales, properties landing in bored allies' hands. A pattern of abuse under Ella Lenina Croft. 2 days later, the state attorney general held a press conference. Dad and I watched live. "My office has opened an official investigation into the Stone Ridge HOA," he declared. "Based on credible allegations of corruption, discriminatory enforcement, extortion, and financial misconduct." My breath caught. This was huge. The fire she lit on our lawn had illuminated her own dark empire. Word spread that financial records Ella Lenina thought buried had been anonymously delivered to the AG. Someone close to her smelled a sinking ship. Self-preservation trumped loyalty. A former board member came forward to cooperate. Almost immediately, she was harassed: anonymous calls, vandalized car. The message clear: Ella Lenina was still fighting dirty. That week, Dad, I, and local vets made ourselves quietly visible in her neighborhood. Walking dogs. Driving by. No threats. Just presence. She wasn't alone. Soon, the remaining board members began resigning, scrambling to distance themselves. Within a week, Ella Lenina stood virtually alone, besieged by lawsuits, state investigation, condemned by public opinion, abandoned by her own. An emergency Stone Ridge meeting was called, not by Ella Lenina, but by the panicked remaining board. Dad and I attended, not to speak, but to witness. The community center buzzed with nervous energy. Homeowners clustered, whispering, eyes flicking toward the board table. Ella Lenina arrived late, sweeping in with forced arrogance, though strain showed at her mouth. She sat at the head as if nothing had changed, ignoring mutters and hostile stares. Inside, when the motion for her immediate removal was read, Elenina didn't wait. She erupted. Leapt to her feet, spewing accusations, dredging grievances, spitting venom at incompetence and betrayal. She threatened lawsuits, exposure, anything she could clutch at. Witnesses later described it as not leadership, but a cornered tyrant lashing out. Faced with irrefutable legal notices, undeniable investigation, and no support, she was presented with resignation papers. With a jagged slash of a signature, she threw the pen down. When she emerged from the building, cameras flashing, her face was pale, trembling with rage. Across the street, a line of Marines stood in full dress blues. Silent. Watching. Their gaze a condemnation sharper than any shout. Elenina froze, then ducked her head, scurried to her car, and fled. She had forced others to bow. Now she fled in disgrace. Within weeks, battered by lawsuits and investigation, Stone Ridge HOA collapsed. Homeowners voted overwhelmingly, dissolve it. The petty empire she'd built was erased. Elenina vanished from public view, consumed by legal battles and disgrace. Stone Ridge slowly settled back into rhythm, though the scorched patch on our lawn healed slower than the rest. One quiet Sunday, Colonel Cole arrived. Not in uniform, but as a fellow Marine, carrying a garment bag with reverence. "For you," he said, handing it to me. I felt the fabric, familiar, heavy. "Check the inside," he nodded. I opened the lining. Embroidered in subtle gold thread, Evans, Garcia, Miller. The names of those who never came home. Etched permanently in memory, now sewn into cloth. "The Corps takes care of its own," Colonel Cole said, hand firm on my shoulder. Wearing that uniform felt like armor, not against bullets, but against dishonor, infused with the spirit of my fallen brothers. Our ordeal rippled outward. People began questioning HOA overreach, especially against military families. Veteran groups, lawmakers, ordinary citizens. On Capitol Hill, a bill emerged, the Military Service Honor Act, quickly dubbed the Vance Act. Dad and I traveled to Washington. From the gallery, I watched as lawmakers spoke passionately. That day, they didn't argue. They stood together. When the vote flashed and the chamber rose in a standing ovation, I heard it as a marching cadence echoing through marble halls. The law passed. Soon, across 50 states, photos appeared, flags, framed uniforms, dress jackets hung proudly on porches. A silent declaration, we stand together. Months later, a downtown park hosted a gathering. No flashy stage, just tents, folding chairs, faces, young, old, military, civilian. It was meant to celebrate the Vance Act, but it became more, a communal affirmation. I stepped up, the new uniform fitting perfectly, names resting over my heart. "This was never just about a uniform," I said, voice steady. "It was about the honor stitched into it. About sacrifice woven into its fabric. About every service member told their symbols were an eyesore." I paused. "Some will never understand. But we do. And when they dishonor one of us, they answer to all of us." Silence hung. Then a single voice, "Fi." Like a trigger, the park roared, "Semper Fi." The tide of voices rolled over me, strong and unbroken. That night, our house was quiet. Dad brewed coffee, his hands trembling faintly, muscle memory from years of marches. He pushed me a mug. "What's next for you?" "For now, stay home," I said. "Fix the porch. Replace the glass. Replant the grass. And keep the case there." He smiled, eyes wrinkling. "It's not coming down," he echoed. We sat, listening to insects outside. I stepped onto the porch, inhaling wood and grass, hearing the flags snap softly. I thought of Elenina, not with hate, but with recognition. Some people believe rules are the goal, not the tool. Sometimes it takes fire to expose their limits. She was gone, consumed by hearings and bills. I felt no triumph. Just closure. I placed the new uniform inside the case. My fingers brushed the gold thread, each name. I whispered, not a vow, for the vow had never left me, but a promise, to guard it. For them. For Dad. For those who stood silent in the street that morning. Before closing the case, I slid a folded paper into the corner, a copy of the Vance Act. Not for boasting, but as a reminder, pain can become law, ashes can become light. A year later, the lawn was green again. The scorched patch remained a slightly darker shade, like a scar. Every morning I glanced at it, not to recall rage, but to remember the day people stood in silent unity. Across the street, Ella Lenina's old house had new owners, a young,